Welcome to the Fleet Geeks Podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook? So we are live. That was a bit disconcerting a minute because I was like, oh, I wonder where we're going live to. And then I realized that we're recording only. So we're using StreamYard for recording this podcast episode, which is unusual for us, isn't it, Jamie? We're normally face to face, aren't we?
Yeah, a bit different today.
Bit different, but I've got puppies and
Will they be making an appearance?
I don't know. They're being quiet at the minute, which is good, to be fair, which is good. So yeah, welcome Fleet Geekers to this Fleet Geek podcast. Look at me trying to get the mouthful. And we're a geek short as well. No Mike today. What's Mike up to, Jay?
I don't actually know what he's up to. Is he training?
No, I think he's just chilling out at home,
he's
mate,
probably
to
just
be fair.
chilling, yeah. Yeah. I don't know where he is.
No, he is he's training. He's doing some associate work for Logistics UK, doing transport manager CPC. I think he's doing a revision day today. I think he's doing a revision and exam day today, mate. So yeah, so people are stuck with us too, right? And we've already managed to waffle for a minute, so that's pretty cool. In this session, we're going to talk. We don't even know what episode number it is, either, do we?
We don't know.
We're about to come on, going, what episode number is it? Oh, I don't know. No,
I wanted to say 6, but I know we've done more than 6.
No, so I think we're about episode 10, something like that. So if this is the first one you listen to, you've got 9 more to catch up on. Anyway, this one we decided to do because Mike's not about to waffle on, but like he does, about training and things like that. Let's talk about more interesting stuff like health and safety. That's what we thought.
Really interesting. Known for being interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Known for being interesting, particularly when it comes to Jamie and I. So we're going to talk today about common health and safety mistakes for fleet operators, particularly those that Jamie and I have come across, mate. So what's the biggest howler you've ever come across, mate? Go on, let's go with that
biggest
first.
Howler. I wouldn't say howler. I think the biggest mistake is the lack of communication, perhaps, between drivers and the transport operators themselves. I don't think both sides quite understand what each side comes across at times. And I think sometimes things aren't an easy fix, and sometimes a driver may report a health safety issue thinking it can be fixed straight away, but for the operator it might take a bit of time to put that into practice, and that's not always communicated back. And I think that can be quite a big mistake sometimes because it looks like nothing's happening. In turn, it stops drivers reporting other issues. And I think that's a vicious circle then. But I think if the communication back that we are looking into it, it's going to cost this, we need this in place, etc., etc. I think that's the biggest mistake.
I think that's a great shout, to be fair, because it's, communication or communicating effectively with staff is so important. And then it just demoralizes like engagement, doesn't it? And guys just think, oh, well, they don't care, so I'm not going to tell them anything anymore, so I'm not going to bother. Yeah, that's so true, to be fair. So true. I think that's definitely a common one. I think, like we've both gone into a lot of fleet operators and sort of seen a sorry state of affairs. I think the worst place I've been to, and I won't mention names but I've definitely genuinely felt like I was going to get run over by a forklift.
Yeah, I think is it somewhere we've both been, is it? Or probably it's different. Yeah.
Definitely. I've genuinely felt like I was going to get run over by a forklift. I'm trying to think where else have I genuinely felt unsafe. I think you've felt unsafe that you're going to get hit by a bucket before, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, definitely.
Not literally by like a carry bucket. I mean, like someone's not been washing their car. Someone's not been washing their car and threatened to hit you with a bucket.
No, definitely a grab bucket swinging around and people just walking around underneath it. I think sometimes when people are in that environment all day, every day, they perhaps just get used to that risk. I'm not sure. Yeah. And then as an outsider coming in, you think, wow, that's going on, day out. And then when you speak to these people, they sometimes can be quite surprised that you raise it as a concern, which is another concern, I suppose. But
definitely. So I think that's a really good point. Desensitization to risk or particular risks in an environment, because people get so used to it and so lazy, they don't really realize. And And I often think there's this like I think this is another, as well as desensitizing, I think this is another, there's like this arrogance as well, like our accident record's really good, so just because there's been an absence of accidents or incidents, it doesn't necessarily mean it's safe.
Past performance is not an indicator of the current risk, is it? Unfortunately, and,
absolutely.
People do use that at times. Like I've heard that mentioned recently, actually. It's always been okay. So what are the big worries have you seen, or big issues have you seen about?
So I think the big one for me, like, so we could start with like documentation and stuff, but I think let's not sort of start with documentation, because that's kind of like after. I think there's just a general, and we've kind of alluded to it, with lack of comms, desensitization, and just general poor attitudes towards safety. I think one of the key errors or issues in the fleet operator sector is just around training and quality of training.
Massively, yeah, definitely.
I think it's a big problem. And the fact that we can, there's already mandatory training in place, but actually that'll go into businesses with, I don't know, 50 people, and there's no first aider, there's no fire marshal. But they're doing CPC, they're doing driver CPC because it's mandatory, but there's a lack of understanding of the basic requirements for health and safety.
No, you're very true on that, definitely. Training's the way around most things, and if you look at any risk assessment, one of the key parts of any risk assessment is training, isn't it? Make sure everyone's trained. So
absolutely. And we'll do a podcast separately on risk assessment, but that makes me laugh as well, because you go into businesses and you look at their risk assessments, and there's these controls in place, and you're like, you're not even doing the controls that you say that you've got in place. They're not even like, where is the evidence that this control's in place?
It can be a bit of a tick box exercise for some people. You're right. I even saw I went to a haulier. They didn't even have a risk assessment for the driving part of their operation, and they'd paid someone to come in and do these risk assessments, and never even assess the biggest part of the business is driving, and that's obviously the biggest risk.
Well, and that's the thing, because you get in a generic health and safety person who just literally has their template documents, don't they? And then they just go, exactly, here's your template documents, and they've not actually properly assessed the risk of the different activities that happen in the business. Yeah,
and I bet there's risk assessments that are wrote, and I don't want to go too much on risk assessments because we're gonna like I say, cover that in a separate podcast. But I bet there's risk assessments wrote where people have not even been on site. That's a worry as well. I can just imagine that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people have definitely got to be present and seen the work that's being carried out. And like the other thing, so I'm actually making notes here. I'm making notes on what we're saying. So as we're talking, I'm thinking of them. So another clear one. So risk assessments that haven't been carried out whilst on site or actually seeing the work being carried out. Basically, team members who haven't been consulted on the controls. So
true.
Essentially, like, the risk assessment's been done with no actual knowledge of the work that's carried out.
No, that's really important, actually, to involve the people that are doing the task. They're the people that know the risks and the inherent dangers they're facing when they're doing these tasks. So yeah, you're right. Involving the people.
Definitely. Yeah. And like, we could start quoting the regulations from the Health and Safety at Work Act and the 99 Health and Safety Management Regulations. But we don't need to, because this is just like doing things properly, right? So we don't necessarily need to scare people with saying, look, the law states that you've got to do. The law states you've got to do this stuff. We're not going to necessarily quote the exact regulations, but when you have work that's carried out, if essentially you need to ensure that the risk assessment's carried out for the way the work's actually done, or if the way the work's actually done isn't the best way of doing it, you need to speak to people and agree the right way of doing it, and therefore document that.
Yeah, definitely. Once again, communicate that things that everyone knows how things should be done generally, don't they, as well? And if you're not happy with things, definitely, like you say, raise it and get it in writing as well.
And did you know? So this is something that we're really, really big on in the fleet sector, about getting stuff in writing and what have you. But I've certainly heard through the grapevine. I've not asked an HSE person directly, but essentially the comms on a risk assessment to team members doesn't necessarily have to be written. You could do a video. You could do a video, or you could do like an audio recording of the instructions, for example. So
that's a really good idea, isn't it?
I think that's not a bad shout, actually. I think
people generally, I've seen people come in, they don't want to read it, but whereas you sit a video down, people are quite happy to sit and watch a video, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing that I think a lot of operators get wrong is, and I think this is all the way through, and that is having a good quality safety induction. I think a great quality safety induction really, really does set a stall out early for setting the culture in their business.
Massive. I'm glad you said the culture of a business. Generally, I always say if you do one thing right, if a company's doing one thing right, they're generally doing everything right, because that's the culture. Yeah. The culture is we do these things right.
Definitely.
So that's massive, I think.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today.
Just setting that as well at the start.
And just to give people an example, like one of the operators that I work quite closely with, we've spent quite a bit of time. Andy, our colleague Andy, and he'll probably appreciate the shout out. I spent a long time preparing a great quality induction process covering essentially all of the safe working practices for all of the people in the business. And essentially it's like this modular induction training. So, if someone does one role, they get sort of so much of it. And then if they do like the most complex role, they kind of get all of it. And it's kind of in these varying parts. So we've been able to revisit it. We're calling it, I think we need to think of a sexier name, because we're calling it Compliance 22, which is like the most unsexy name.
Straight away, doesn't it? Yeah, compliance.
It's like the most unsexy name for a training scheme. But we're kind of reintroducing everything. So yeah, we need to think of something a bit sexier. But I think ultimately the people on the receiving end don't really care what we've called it. It's about making sure that the training's right and it's hitting the right level. And they're sort of re-aware of or made aware of certainly their obligations, but also the controls that are in place to help protect them and help support them.
Yeah, definitely. It's so important. Like I say, improving the culture through training is a great way to improve the culture, isn't it? So it's definitely a real good idea.
No, cool. I think so when we think about it, so there's lots and lots of mistakes that people make. So I think when we think about how we'd actually implement, like people might be listening thinking, well, where'd you start from? If you've got sort of no base, where'd you start from? And obviously the smaller the business, the easier it is to implement change and to change the culture. As the business gets bigger and bigger, spoiler alert, it's going to get harder and harder and harder to be able to implement the right culture and safety practices the bigger the business gets, because people get used to, like, this is the way we've always done it, and that attitude. So essentially, if we were to go into an organization, we would essentially carry out like an audit initially, wouldn't we, about what's going on, where is the risk, understanding what's in place for each of the things, because sometimes the management of the safety may not be immediately apparent, but it is potentially there. And sometimes people are doing things well without realizing, because they've maybe got, they've got some really good people in the business, some really good managers. So we don't necessarily go in and just rip everything apart. But at the same time, we need to make sure we're realistic with the feedback that we give, and that if things aren't sort of where they should be, because it's our responsibility to make line managers, make directors aware of their obligations, of their duties. So
it's about explaining the reasons as well why you're saying these things. People like to understand the issue, don't they? Rather than be just told issues, they like to understand what the actual issue is, the implications.
Absolutely.
And it's about speaking to the right people on these sites to make sure these things are implemented as well.
Definitely. And I think once you've done an audit, you can create like an action plan, can't you, of like what's like. So one of the things with safety is that it's like an ever moving feast, right? So you should always have like an action plan that's there, and then you can just work at it over time. as you improve, and then you have to review on an annual basis, or maybe less regularly, depending on when you set for review, the different activities you take place. But there's so much fun to be had around speaking to people, understanding how they're doing stuff, and then you can build the risk assessments around how things are being done. You can ask people, what do they feel like they need, from a PPE point of view, but also obviously providing, making sure that people are provided with the right PPE, that's part of it, making sure people are trained properly to use all of the equipment, making sure that all the safety features of equipment are properly fitted. There's so much, isn't there? When you start going into it,
it doesn't stop, does it? You're right. It's just constant. Yeah, so many things to look at.
Yeah, that you've got a register of all the equipment on site, making sure it's regularly serviced. Any Lola that needs to be carried out is done. It's a big task. And actually, if an operator, and so here's the thing for you, is that I think a lot of operators don't really realise who the responsible person is for health and safety, because a lot of operators will run with the directors and then the transport manager. And then there's no support function, is there, from a safety or an HR point of view?
No, you're right. Like we said, there's so many facets to health and safety, and making it work for the business, the company. And no one company there's no one solution that fits every company, really, because you may be a haulier, but you might be doing specialist work. Like you say, you might have Lola issues where you've got to make sure things are inspected. And then the other side of that might be a company that's delivering frozen food, and they've got to go around all the regulation with the freezers and et cetera. So, yeah, it's massive, isn't it? The health and safety side of the sector.
I was going to say, and that's the thing, is I think that every operator will have their own challenges, because, like, depending on which area they operate in, if they're waste, then they've got all the waste regulations to think about. Like you say, if they're in heavy haulage, then they've got their own specialist regulations that they need to adhere to. I can't remember what else you mentioned just now, but certainly lifting. So anything with anything with a high ab or crane or anything like that attached to it, you've got lift in there. And particularly, like, warehousing and those kinds of things. How often do you walk in somewhere, right? How often do you walk in somewhere and you've got people driving forklifts that have had no training? Oh, yeah,
definitely. You've probably walked in, you've not signed in, no one knows you're there, and there's a forklift going by you with, you're right. That's it's a worry, really. Well, that's why companies like us exist, obviously, to help these places out.
Yeah, but I think in fairness, common mistakes. I think one of the biggest mistakes that will affect all of our fleet operators is the traffic management system in on site in their premises, and making sure that everything's properly marked out, making sure there's barriers where necessary to ensure that people can't interact with moving vehicles. I think that's probably one of the riskiest things they'll be facing, isn't it?
It is.
But yeah, there's a lot to consider otherwise. And workshops, so many operators have their own workshops as well, and then they need their own, you need your own training, they need their own servicing of equipment and maintaining of equipment, and their own set of risk assessments.
Chemicals on sites as well. So then isn't there? You've got your COSH, etc.
Yeah, COSH is a big one, isn't it? I think we're going through the whole fours list here, aren't we?
What I will say as well, I think actually that you started off, what's the biggest thing I see is PPE being worn incorrectly. Actually,
yes,
that's quite a big one I see as I go around. Boots that are not tied, things like that, because they want to slip their boots off when they get back in the cab.
Yes.
So I think that's probably the biggest one I actually see when I go around, and it's quite an easy fix as well.
I was going to say tidying up the act isn't too much of a challenging thing, is it?
No,
I think I think training and awareness is so vital, though, isn't it? Because we're a people business, aren't we? So it's making sure that we have the right people and we engage them, and they start to look out for themselves and each other as well. Awesome, mate. Awesome. I think we're just about there. Hopefully, if you've
18 minutes.
Yeah, that flew by, didn't it? And we haven't even got onto like doing risk assessments and stuff, but we'll save that for another podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening. If you have, then please do subscribe, share it with your friends. Jay, great chatting to you. I'll see you on the next one, mate. Cheers.
See you all later. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.